That was in 1975. I would left Wheatland Ave in Somerville, right off of Winter Hill, and I was fortunate. I got down to they call it Palmer Cove in Salem, and there's a yacht club down there called Palmer Yacht Club. So I guess that's what it's named after. But it was all these brick buildings, all tenements, and there had to be a couple of thousand Puerto Rican families, and I was the only white girl in this apartment. But the selling feature was it was $13 a week. There were 4 other girls there from Salem State College, and I was able to get a room there. It was an eye-opener. After going from Boston, I was going to all my AA meetings in Boston, and one time we got a car, about 8 of us piled in, and we went over to Marblehead. They called it the noontime, and something clicked over there for me. Being in the city was still kind of scary for me because all it is had a connection with my drinking. So coming to Marblehead was kind of like a little bit of freedom. And at that time, things weren't going well in my life, and it was an opportunity to take that apartment in Salem. And that was around May of '75. And the trees were beautiful, and it was just like I thought. I had really hit the mother lode. It was really nice. So I came to Salem, and $13 a week, and I had an old 1970 Dodge Springer, or Slinger it was called. It was a Slant 8, and I'd never in my life driven a Hydromatic. It was the first time driving a car that you could just put your foot on the gas and it would just go. Very scary because I could go very fast, and that was a good thing I didn't have that, prior to coming to Salem. But I liked Salem. I liked being there. I liked going to all my meetings in Marblehead and Salem. Get to walk everywhere. Salem's a good walking town, so that brought me to Salem. And I just started meeting people. I was unemployable. I was almost 2 years sober, but I wasn't ready to work with people. And it was my opening. Little did I know, 4 decades later, I'm still kind of like in the same neighborhood, even though I have a different address. It was what they call, I met my people. Everyone I met, it all worked out. I could travel anywhere. I could go to Lynn, I could go to Beverly, and my base was Salem. It was a good place to be. Like I said, I didn't need a lot of money. $20 a week. I remember Billy gave me $20 a week. $13 was for rent, $2 for gas, $3 for food, $2 for AA meetings. It was only 25 cents. And then one day a week, I'd go to Marblehead and eat at a diner downtown Marblehead. It was called Brownies, and it was almost like $1.50. You could get the luncheon special there, and that was my $20 every week. Didn't need clothes. That was immaterial at the time. But yeah, that's how I got started in Salem. Yeah, it was quite, you'd call it quite dangerous. A lot of drug dealing down there, a lot of violence, a lot of domestic violence. But in the building I lived, I tell you, no one bothered me.
What street was that?
It was on Palmer Street.
Oh, yeah.
77 Palmer Street, and people were really, they were all nice to me. I don't know why, just they knew I wasn't going to bother them. Now and then I'd have my dog Terran come down and stay with me. Yeah, plus it was right near the Cove, like I say, Palmer Cove. It was water, and you could go over to the Cove and go in the water. Now, Salem Harbor in 1974, I don't think live fish were in there. It was kind of polluted. But the fact that I could just walk down the street and put my feet in the water, it was in back of the old Shetland buildings, which are the old factories, the old big factories in Salem, which are right now in 2019 about to be torn down.
What were the Shetlands?
Say again?
What was that, the Shetland factory?
The Shetland factories, those were all they were mills for making linen in Salem. And they went back to like 1880. They were really old mills because they all were powered by the water there, the waterway. And I could walk anywhere. That was a key. It was right downtown, and I could walk up to past the Immaculate Conception, past Johnny Green's funeral home, down Essex Street, and go to St. Peter's every Tuesday and Friday. I could walk over over Bridge Street, go to Beverly every Monday night. I'd walk with the dog. I didn't have to be in the car all the time. Monday night I'd go to Castle Hill. That was another part of Salem. Plus Salem was still on the verge of, there was still a big thing downtown Salem was the hobos. Hobos were still alive and well. Now they're quite elderly, but it was the remains. These are the remains of World War II and the Korean War. And because they all lived down by the tracks. Now if you went over to Peabody, it was called Walnut Street. There were hundreds over there still, winos on the streets. It had nothing to do with being homeless. It was different. These were real hobos. And they're the guys that maybe at some point in their life had worked all in the leather factories in Peabody and what they had left in Salem. But they were the Muscatel gang. So a lot of these men, when I would walk down the street with my dog, they would know who I was. And how would they know? Because they'd all come to the meeting on like every night. They'd go to the AA meetings. They were allowed in, but they were only allowed in the back. They could sit, as long as they were quiet, they could have a cup of coffee. And these guys were like one step from going into the DTs all the time. But as long as they caused no trouble, most of the churches we went to didn't mind them being there. And there was one, he was called Sailor Bill. Sailor Bill just had an eye for me. And when he saw me with the dog and saw me with my red hair, he would just, at this horsey voice would just go, Ginger, Ginger. And of course I'd give him 50 cents if I had it, 20 cents. And there was Charlie the train. I can see those gentlemen. And I was just like popular. I became, because I walked everywhere and everyone saw me, the dog, and you see Sailor Bill everywhere. Everyone knew him. He was the drunk of Salem for many years. I'd go downtown and he'd be standing in some corner, and every policeman knew him, and then they all got to know me because he'd yell me out, Ginger's over here, Ginger. And I mean, this is the caliber of people I was hanging out with, but you know, he didn't hurt me and I didn't hurt him. And most of the people, like you say, there's so many, everybody in A at that time, no one had a job. So everybody was walking around somewhere or meeting up. There was coffee. There was a church down near St. Peter's next door to it, and they gave out free coffee like at 2 o'clock every afternoon at tea. They were really trying to get you to, go to their church. But we'd go there and we'd get a biscuit and a cup of tea for free. Of course, all the winos would be there, and they were just, this would be cold, and they're all trying to get something to eat, and then hit up money just to get a pint. No, they needed $1.10 to get a little bottle of Jameson or something. Salem was good. Salem was a good place to be. Felt very safe. If there was violence going on, I didn't recognize it and didn't see it. I could be out 24 hours a day. It didn't bother me one bit.
Or the Muscatel gang.
What's that again?
You said the Muscatel gang.
Muscatel. Yeah, that was a wine. That was the cheapest wine you could buy. Muscatel was like, you say, a real winos, like champagne. You could get a gallon for like $2. It was like rot gut, but it did the trick. If you need a drink, it did the trick. Well, one of the best things was you come downtown. There used to be a First National, and there was a Goodwill right on Washington Street, which is now Bank of America and of course Starbucks. So you go into First National, get my $2 worth of food, whatever I could get for $2. And then you go into Goodwill. Now, Goodwill was run by, let me get her name. Oh, God, I'll think of her name in a minute. Anyways, she had one eye. She was sober in AA. Ernestine. I think it was Ernestine. And she had, I could be wrong on that name. Anyways, she ran it. And she had a real New York accent, like real Brooklyn. But she would talk really rough and tough. And she'd see me. And she scared me, like she had one eye, and she had like 3 teeth. Muriel, that was her name, Muriel. As a matter of fact, to this day, the potatoes that you and I mash, that potato masher is from Muriel. So there I am, 1975, going in with like a couple of bucks into Goodwill, and I needed a chair or I remember I needed a potato masher and some silverware, and silverware was like about a nickel. You get like 4 pieces for a nickel. But she would say to me, "What do you want?" And I'd say, "Muriel, I need like," she liked me. She says, I said, "I need this chair or I need this little table for my room." And God, she'd put it away and hide it, and she'd whisper to me, "Come back in a week." And she'd have it for me. I just had to give her $1. Now, Muriel, I know, pocketed all that money because she was poor. But she ran the store, and I remember buying my potato masher. And I shouldn't have forgot her name. And now it's just a brown handle, but they used to have a red handle. That's why those 4 up there I bought remind me of Muriel. And that was 25 cents. That was like the best going down to Muriel's, down to Goodwill. Those were good times. Like you say, you got what you needed. You didn't need a lot of money. And again, every Friday night, Muriel, she was at that meeting until she died. She must have been in her late 70s. In the 1980s, I think in 1990, she passed away. And she was, like you say, the real hardcore female alcoholic. But she stayed sober many, many years.
So where did you move on from there?
Let me see
on
that.
the street?
I started, okay, so that was like April. I was in Cove, and then I got really hoity-toity. People in AA, Billy Balkus was the guy that lived in a rooming house over in Beverly, and I go over there. We were really good friends, and he told me about this bar. It was called, it's probably called Fibba McGee and Molly's now, but in those days it was just probably a stupid bar. But he says, there's a room up there. It's for $25 a week. Now here I'm going for 13, but he says, it's above a bar, but the fact is it's your own apartment. There were 3 rooms. You had your own kitchen, you had a bathroom, and then you had a bedroom. And I went and looked at it, and of course the guy that owned it was an old Frenchman who owned the Pilgrim Motel on Bridge Street, which was like the dump. But everybody, would go to the dump. And I went down and I says, I want to rent your room for $25 a week. And he says, that's only for guys, that's only for guys. I go, no, I need that. And I had the dog. I said, I got a dog. And he says, okay. So he let me go down. He says, you'll last 2 weeks. To get into this place, you couldn't go through the bar. You had to go in the back. It was really raunchy backyard. And all the drunks were outside all the time. And the first time they saw me move in with the dog, little did I know, the people who moved me in, there was Dick Claflin, Billy Balkus, Billy Donahue, all the people, my friends. There was, oh my God, Frenchie was there. These people who were just so good to me, and they really, really taken care of me. Got me up, and they had words with these people like, don't bother her, because we'll be back stuff. And every day, that was, because after leaving the Cove, like I say, I had these 4 girls as my roommates, which they were okay. They just, it was hard for me being around a lot of people in those days. That was too much. Over on above the bar, I loved it. I had my own place. I got all my furniture from Muriel. She gave me everything I needed. I have no idea how I found a mattress, but I know someone gave me a mattress. And the thing was, in the bathroom, it had a window the size of, like, every window was like 6 feet long, even the bathroom. And I remember we went to Salem Hospital to a meeting one night, and I says, I know how hospitals work, and we're able to go to a floor. And we visited someone, and we found the, linen room, and I confiscated like 4 white sheets, went back to my apartment there, and I remember Dick Claflin got a nail and hammer and nailed the 4 sheets up, so, I'm taking a shower, no one's looking in. Like I said, I look back now, you didn't need money, you just needed people to be with you. And I loved that apartment. That was like the best. $25. The dog could stay there by herself, even though she was with me all the time. I still wasn't working because she was with me everywhere. But Beverly was a nice place. Now I'm in Beverly, and downtown Beverly was a nice place to walk around. It had more restaurants, and across the street lived this girl, Barry. Her father was one of the original Budweiser CEOs. She was a really rich bitch from Marblehead. But you met her, she was so hardcore. She had done time. She was one of the famous people who got busted in Eggertown at Chappaquiddick doing drugs, like in the early 70s, and she did 3 years in jail. And she wasn't allowed back in Marblehead. So she was living in all rooming houses were on the downtown Beverly. So she lived there, and she had a little baby. She got knocked up in prison. She did that on purpose. She got knocked up so she could get out. She was a con. She could do anything. But downstairs was this guy, Pete the Frenchman. He was an older man from Gloucester, very French. And him and I hit it off, and got everybody was on welfare. That's when you got welfare: cheese, macaroni, powdered milk. There might have been sugar. There were 5 things you could go down. So all those people were on welfare. So we would somebody would make mac and cheese every other day. Pete would get in the car and we'd drive. He had a car. I had a car, but we'd drive his car to Salem Willows. We'd go fishing over there, and we got this thing called, I'd never heard these fish called bluefish. But it was like so oily. But we would fish about 10 of those. He'd clean them and gut them. He'd fry them up. And we had so much free food. And everybody would be over, like you go over to Pete's house. It was right across the street from where I lived. And then I'd go down the bar. And I always knew a bartender in there, and they knew I was upstairs. And I'd always ask them for, like, just wanted salsa water, stuff like that. And they'd just give me, so we thought we were hoity-toity. We'd have salsa water with our fried fish, mac and cheese, they had white bread. We'd make grilled cheese sandwiches. We ate well. I liked living over there. I lived there for, I think, almost a year over in Beverly. But you could walk. That was the thing. I could drive everywhere with the dog, but you could be on foot. And now time's moving. Now it's like another year. I've been there a year. And my best friend at the time was Dick Claflin, rugged guy from Lynn. Now he lived in an abandoned house in Lynn, the 3rd floor in a room. And I went to his house, and he had an electric cord going into the next. I go, how do you put a light on in here? It was an abandoned house he was living in. It was hysterical. And he had a mattress. He built everything. There was running water, which was cold, but he had electric cord going into the lady next door. And the lady who owned the 3-decker that was abandoned, her husband had just died. She was from Gloucester. She was also French. She liked Dick. She knew he was trying to, these people had no money. And because everybody, was just unemployable at the end of their drinking, these people. They were sober. He was sober like almost 10 years. So I was 26, and he's like 40. He was like 15 years older, but he looked like my age. And so Dick would say, we'd go visit this other guy in the Willows, Salem Willows, his best friend, Jack Haig, who I was very close to. We'd always see at meetings. And Jack Haig was Mr. Spiritual. Everyone loved him. He was the guru. Very clean cut. He looked like Oz on Burt. Who's Frank Oz? Yeah, that looked very meticulous guy. He had just gone through some sadness. His wife had left him for the guy at the gym, and but he had a big full white albino German Shepherd and the cat called Fred. So we'd go over to there a lot over the Salem Willows. He lived right on the ocean, and it was on the 3rd floor, look at the porch, and oh my God, I said, what a place to live. He'd lived there for a number of years. On a Friday night, we'd all get in the car. He had a SS4 on the floor, and we'd fly up to, he'd call it, I got a burned carbon. We'd go up to Gloucester on a Friday night sometimes, just about 5 of us get in the car, come back. And around February, Dick picks me up and says, I got some exciting news for me, but he goes, I don't know about you. I says, what? He says, Jack and I are moving to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I think there was me and these 4 other guys were like, what? Jack had to get out. His wife had left him, and he was an engineer by trade, and he had a job offer down in Baton Rouge. He was working with plastics, very smart guy. And so we went over there, and he was getting packing to leave, and we're all like crying. And he looked at me and he says, he says, you like this place, don't you? I said, no. I said, oh my God. I said, this is great. He says, you could afford it. I says, I don't have a job. I was on unemployment. I had unemployment. I says, I'm almost willing to get a job. I did have a job. I drove a school bus and a tractor trailer in between. And of course, and that was a whole other story, but I didn't stay doing it. And I said, Jack, he said, listen, Mrs. Burns is here. If I asked her if she would rent it to you, would you take it? She says, you would like, this would be good for you, Colleen. He goes, this will give you peace over here, because my brain was so mushy. And there was Gil, there was Guy Gil, and he's older than me. His son, so I'm like in my 27, 26, and his son's about 18 there, big guy, Billy, and a bunch of other people. And Mrs. Burns comes up, an older lady, and I says, I says, like they say, she's quiet, she only has a dog. And I remember it was $185 a month, which is pretty much, I was paying $100 a month, and I said, I could never afford it. And Jack said, you can. He just he says, you can do it, I know you can. And I remember we walked out of there, and we were crying, because I was going to live there. But a week later, they got in the car and they moved, and God, we were all crying, and then that was my place. So I got in my car and moved my little stuff. I think I had, whatever it was like, 5 bags of stuff. And that's how I got to Salem Willows, where I stayed for 7 years. It was there's probably a bigger word I could use, the odyssey of my life started there, because that was where a lot of things. I was able to bring people into my life there. That's where Uncle Eddie and Papa came to live with me. I was able to give them a home there. Like I say, people came to visit. We had a wedding there. We had so leaving Beverly and moving back to Salem Willows. And I moved in there in March or April. That was like a year later. And by that September, I became employable. I was 2 years sober, and I applied in July for a job all over. I kept applying to hospitals, and then Mass General called me and said, we have an opening in the operating room. And that was in September of 1976. And I remember my first paycheck at Mass General, they said, will you take $235 a week? I was living on $35 a week, and all of a sudden they're going to give me more. I'm like, I think I can do it. I mean, I felt rich. That first paycheck paid my month's rent. That first paycheck, I took home like over $200, I remember. I remember the 4th week at work, I even worked overtime. I got like another $50. It was like, you could make money, really. I said, oh my God. And so I'd leave the Willows every morning, 5:30, go down to downtown, get on the train. Now in those days, the B&M did not run early trains. They just had freight trains. So when you got on the train at 5:30, you sat in the freight part. There was just like boxes there. There was nothing. There was no seats. And you sat there. And that's where I met a whole plethora of people who drove the train every day. People who in AA, and it was kind of like it started the morning off at an AA meeting, 5:30, wherever people were going. It was really quite the place to be on that B&M. That was a good thing. It was better than driving into Boston. It was, that was a whole other trip, the B&M. That was a life in itself. Well, when I moved in, there was a cat that kept showing up, and everyone, and Jack had said to me, I'm leaving Fred, I'm not taking the cat. And I said, well, I really don't know how to take care of cats. I said, I can't. He goes, I can't. He goes, it was my wife's cat, I'm not taking it. The night before he left, though, his white shepherd, and I can't think of the name of the shepherd, was stolen. So him and Dick drove all the way down to Louisiana without the white shepherd. It was so sad. Someone came and stole it. And so I got the cat. So that was the beginning. So moving in, I have this dog, Taryn, and she was fine. And there was hundreds of other dogs in the neighborhood, like 5 or 6 that ran freely. And my neighbors downstairs were nice. And before I know it, like, people would talk to you. Like, it was so tiny. There was a banker 2 doors down, like, who ran the Salem Savings. Like, everyone who lived out there liked it. They were all caliber of people in Salem, everybody. But everyone spoke to everybody. I just couldn't get over, and it's true. What it was, it's all about the people. It's always about the people. Everyone said hi. They liked the dog. Yeah, like I say, people came. You had the ocean right there. You looked at the ocean every day. It was just, I could leave in the morning, come back at 3:30 on the train, and just just be there. I had big windows, I had a porch, I had tons of plants growing. It was a hippie time, very green. Had all my wandering Jew, ferns. I sewed everything. I kind of get back into sewing there. It really was, like I say, it's like I felt mature living there. I felt really, really nice. Had a lot of relationships. People, I thought were going to be the forever people. They came and they went. And then in 1979, 2 years later, that's when Papa got real sick. His Parkinson's got bad, and through events with my mother, Papa was never in a nursing home, in a hospital for anything. He just never went. He's too afraid. He had, that severe alcoholic Irish withdrawal of people, very fearful. But he did end up, after my mother whacked him in the head with a cast iron frying pan in the Chelsea Soldiers Home. I got the call from someone, my brother, to say, come see Dad. He's in the hospital. And I saw him, and he was laying there like a beetle on his back. He couldn't even sit up. And he says, what am I going to do? She's going to kill me. And I said, I know she is. She can't help it. My mother, blacked out. I said, I was sober now. 3 or 4 years. 4 years. So I looked at him that day and I said, you can come live with me. Because it was 3 bedrooms, what I had. It was plenty of room. And I says, he laid on his back. He looked up, and the only thing he said was not thank you, what will I do? The first thing he said was, what about Eddie? And I laughed. I said, he can come too. And I was seeing a guy, Bill Laverick. He was a machinist. And I borrowed his truck. We went to Revere, moved my father's stuff, Eddie's stuff. They came, they each got a bedroom. My father did not take his clothes off for 2 days. He was in terror. He had never left his own environment. And I remember some of my friends come by, said, it's my father and whatever. And it was for some reason, I said, he's been in the same clothes for 2 days, and everyone said, it's fine. And I can remember Billy Balkus coming and saying, I slept in my clothes, he goes, I think for 3 months one time. And they would just tell him the truth, and he'd crack up laughing, like you say, because no one intimidated Papa there. So that was a good time, I gotta say, when Uncle Eddie and my father lived there, and they were happy too. So it was good I felt like for once I had done something good. I was able to give them shelter because they didn't know where to go after Revere. And it went on for years. Let me see, a lot of, like I say, then they moved out. In fact, they moved across the street. They went to right next to on the 3rd floor, walk up. They moved in over there, and I had to move because it was the era of condos were coming in, and someone bought the building. Mrs. Burns' son sold the building, and a guy came in from Australia one day, very nice guy. We kept talking, and I thought he was a nice guy till I realized, he goes, I own this house now, you have to leave. And I was devastated, and that was after 6 years being there. Like I say, my girlfriend got married there. People came and left. It was a good place. I was able to have fun there. A lot of funny stuff on there. God, I could just... In the afternoon, my father, one thing he'd do... So all these guys who used to come by, and they'd love to see the house with Jack, because Jack was like the guru. And they'd be sitting on the porch, whatever. So one day, there were the 2 Murphy brothers. They worked for public... they were DPW workers. And they come by the Willows like at 2 o'clock because their shift would end at 3:30. But typical... worker, they were done. They needed a place to hang out. So, for some reason, I said to them, they said, can we come down? Can we sit in your yard? I said, oh yeah, just go down the back. Well, I told my father, these guys, and there was Muscles Murphy. He weighed about 90 pounds, 6'2". He was a character. His brother, Danny, but he was kind of short and heavy. They both worked for DP, and 2 other guys. There was like 4 or 5 of them on the truck. So what Papa would do, He'd see them out there. He'd call them in. He would have coffee made. He would have Entenmann's pastry cut up and bologna sandwiches. And they would be there. And this went on for months and months. He'd have it all ready. So like you say, it gave him something to do. And they'd go to the meeting and I say, your father is unbelievable. And I said, well, first off, it gives him something that he likes to do things like that. That gives him something to do. And plus, you people don't quiz him. You don't ask him nothing. You give him stories and crack him up. I said, he's never had this type of freedom ever. I said, he's always been very parochial, very tight wing. And though that was a good time, I could work all day and know that he was, people, he integrated. And then probably one of the best days, okay, so we're downtown walking around with Papa, and I think we're going to a laundromat. And we're down by Goodwill and Goodwill and First National. And then there's Sailor Bill comes by and got the dog. And I said, Bill, come here. And his real name, it wasn't until he almost died, his name was Everett Robershard. As a matter of fact, when all those winos I talked about, they never lived outside in the wintertime. They were never homeless. What they did, they all went to a place called Tewksbury State Hospital. So every October, they would have a fight with someone or break a window. They would purposely get arrested by the Salem police and then go to jail. And in the morning, the Judge Sears would send them, they'd get sentenced to the winter at Tewksbury State. And what that did is kept them alive. And they all wanted to go there. So they all go to Tewksbury State. They get sober for a while. They'd be, for the winter till they came out again. They get thrown out again. So we're walking down Washington Street, and I said, Sailor Bill, come over here. What, Ginger? I said, I want you to meet my father. Oh, hi. And he has a loaf of, he has a boogie roll, they called it, in his hand, because there used to be a Santora sub there. He'd go in and get they give him old, bread. So he had that. And he has tuna, the can that says tuna on it. And he's putting it into the bread. So he looks at Ed, my father, and he says, you want a tuna fish sandwich? And and my father had false teeth, and they just about, he was laughing so hard because on the other side of the can was cat tuna. So it was a can of cat tuna, and he was eating it, and he'd have to eat it, and my father went, I'll wait. So I said, see? I said, but there he was he'd eat anything, Sailor Bill. That day was so funny, oh my God. And then one day, so my father, of course he'd see him, he'd make a brown bag, we'd drive down and look for Sailor Bill, and we'd get, God, he'd love that. He absolutely gave him a bag of sandwiches, all those people. They, all those winos would get locked up for the winter, and I'd get calls, they'd get a hold of the police station. Someone would come into a Friday night meeting. Is Ginger here? Yeah. We have a note from Bill. Of course, they knew it was Sailor Bill. Bring me puzzles, large. And he wanted the 5,000 piece puzzle. And I brought the Brooklyn Bridge, San Francisco. And of course, they'd want cigarettes, so we'd take a connection up, and we'd get a carton of cigarettes, and which then it was $2 for a carton or something. Me and my girlfriend Kathy would go up to Tewksbury State Hospital and bring it to him. And one time we brought him in with Brooklyn Bridge. He went, I already did the Brooklyn Bridge. You got to give me something else. And Kathy says, take the freaking thing and just do the puzzle. We're giving it to you. But he was such a character. Oh my God, he was so everyone loved Bill. Everyone loved Sailor Bill. Yeah, that was funny times. Funny. It was you didn't have to take a lot of things serious. Well, you could have, but I choose not to. Because it was just fun times. Like I say, and the dog, and Fred the cat. Yeah. And just before that was 79. Before that, the summer, it was the storm of 78, winter of 78. God, we had a snowstorm, it was February 6th. It was before the big storm, the hurricane. And that was the trains would barely made it home on those. And I remember being on the train with this girl, I can see her now, from Mass General. We're coming home together, and oh my God, we're going like, this snowstorm's terrible. Oh my God, we barely made it home. That was on a Thursday. Thought nothing of it. Little did we know, 6 days later, we'd have the storm, the century, whatever, of the decade, storm of 78. And leaving work, they told us, I get out like at 1. I remember I was able, the OR, you could have stayed. I said, no, I want to get home because I had the dog and the cat at home. Got on the train at 1:30. The train didn't pull out like till 6 o'clock that night. It was almost like the last train out of, wherever, Europe. It felt like a European train because there was like a million of us on the train. And they said that's the last train, and that was the last train that went out to the North Shore. Got out, and I made a big mistake. I got into my car, shoveled the snow off, and drove it home. In downtown, they had just built a high-rise inside garage, and these people talking, I'm putting my car in the garage, and going, like, that's stupid. I'm not going to put my car, I'm bringing it home. So I brought the car home. Snow was okay. And the dog and I were happy. I had tons of food in the house. I controlled the heat. It was fine. And whatever night that was on, and then it snowed again, like for 3 days. And it was like, it just didn't stop. And people first day you could get in and out of the willows. And then, of course, we had the National Guard come down, knock on everyone's door, leave. And my neighbor next door, Pat, she worked at Salem Hospital. So, of course, the next day there was no work. There was no trains. And I remember she's the one who said to me, it was late at night, and she says, Billy's not here. Billy, she knocked on my door, and she says, Billy left work. And I think he worked like at the Pig's Eye. He was a cook. And he would have been like 19 years old. He was a young kid. He had just done like a year of prep school, somewhere like cooking school. And she had a big dog, Marty. Marty was like a big, like St. Bernard. I said, put Marty out. She says, no, Marty's afraid of snow. So we went out, but I can remember, we went out. I think I had Tara with me for a while, and I had to put her in the house because there's so much snow. But we got all bundled up, and she literally says, she called, there were phones still working. She says, he left the bar like 3 hours ago. So it was only a straight walk down Blaney Street, Canal Street. She says, he should be home. And so we walked down the hill. So there it was, the Bankers, right down on Bayview Ave. And you couldn't even see cars. We were bumping into things. It was wild. Matter of fact, I said, let's take some rope. We took a piece of rope with us because it was so wild. I carried a shovel, and it wasn't even a plastic shovel. It was a heavy shovel. And we get down the hill, and it's near the ocean. You can see come around the corner. We're just on the edge of leaving the willows, and then we see Billy on the ground. And he had been drinking, and he was passed out. If we didn't come that hour, he would have been definitely dead. And there was a car there that got hit, and it was like, I think it was the bumper that was off of it, or some part of a car. We put him on it. We had the rope. We tied, and we pulled him up. He was like so inebriated, so out, and he was a big kid. He's probably like the size of your friend Willie. I remember, oh my God, we pulled, and we're laughing, we're wetting our pants, we're crying, and we got back, and she's screaming and yelling at him, and I kept saying, don't waste your oxygen, and he finally came to. We got him up the hill, and she got in the house, and the guy downstairs where she lived was a cop, a Salem cop. I cannot think of his name, Polish kid. He wasn't there, but he had a girlfriend staying over. We knocked on her door, and she came out and helped. And I have no idea who she was, but she was nice. I think she was afraid. She wasn't supposed to be there or something, and she was young. But she helped get him up, and Marty the dog came down. Oh my God, Marty was like a big Saint Bernard, and licked him. I remember now. He licked him, licked his face, and I got back home. Oh my God, and then we just didn't go out for days. It was like 4 days stuck there, and I never went to work for a week. The train, you could not get the trains, and they called them bluebirds or blue jays. After that they never could run a train on the track without it had to have an engine to pull the trains, because the trains got the tracks got so warped from the snow, whatever happened. That was a long week. And of course the highways, thank God I was on the highway, because some 15 people died in the 24 hours. all these elderly people in their car. They didn't know to get out. They stayed in the snow. We didn't know. We'd just rise above. They were parked, and they'd have the heater on, but their exhaust pipe got stuck, and they all died quiet deaths. I mean, there were all these people dead on the highway, like, because everybody had to go to work. And that's when, Governor Dukakis, it was the beginning of, why do you go to work? I mean, what was it? I mean, that was like so stupid, everyone going to work and no one getting the time off. It was a good time and a sad time. That was sad. That was, and then then about 4 days later, I went down, my car was parked around the corner. And I remember telling the guy downstairs and the girl who lived there, I think they towed my car, I can't find it. And they said, my God, how could they tow? No one could get in that. I said, well, it's not here. And he was a mechanic, so he kind of knew his stuff. Jock. So I said, I don't know where the car is. It was like, and all of a sudden, when it subsided, there it was on the beach with 4 other cars. It had taken all these cars and just they went out to the ocean. And I can't believe I still had my it was the original 4 on the floor. I had the hydromatic, my first hydromatic Dodge car. Oh my God. And so it was in the ocean. It came out. It was soaking wet. Opened the doors. It was just like from a cartoon. And I said, "Oh my God!" And then about one of the guys that worked for the T, he says his brother or someone worked at Salem High School. He says, "Call the high school shop and see if the guys want to drain it and clean it." And they did. They came, picked it up, took it to the school shop. They kept it for about a month, and I just walked after that for the longest time. Back and forth to work. That was February. And as long as the dog got out, that's all I cared about. Now the people could pick me up and if I need to go somewhere. And in about 3 weeks, I think, the car came back. They had, of course it was infested with salt. And in a couple of years ago, it's going to die. But that thing, the brakes were lousy, but they cleaned it out and that car still went because it was after that. Because I think it was the summer of that was it. Because in September, I bought the Volkswagen Rabbits when I bought the diesel. Because in September, oh yeah, I remember that. That was the summer I was working at Mass General for my second year, and I found out I wanted to put in for summer vacation. I was never going to get one. And this nurse, Terry Maas, says, "You're never going to get a summer vacation." I said, "Why?" She says, "We're older." There's so many nurses that were older, and they were like from a Vietnam era. She says, and they were all in the military, so they all got 2 weeks off every summer. They all took, and plus they got the summer vacation. So they were sucking up like 4 weeks vacation, and the younger people, young like me, were getting nothing. So she said to me, "Sign up for the reserves," and she said, "You'll get summers off." And that's when I went down and signed up. I was going to sign up for the Navy, and they were closed, and that's when I signed up. The door was open. I went into the, that was in August. I went into the, God, no, it was like April. What am I talking about? April. I went into the Coast Guard. I signed up that day, and that's when I went to July 1977. I went to 78. Went to Yorktown, Virginia, and met Mudgett. That's where I met Mudgett during my 2 weeks. I got 2 weeks off, even though it was so hot down there. The first 2 weeks in July 4th down in Virginia, it's 1,000 degrees at night. But we went to that's what him and I went to North Carolina. It's where Kitty Hawk, because we had that weekend off. So we went to Kitty Hawk and the coast there. It's called Cape Hatteras. Probably one of the best vacations I ever to see the ocean, and oh my God, it was just breathtaking place in 2 weeks. So yeah, that's how I got into the military, and I went back after meeting Mudgett, told him about my car and the thing, and he convinced me to buy a Rabbit diesel car. So I had enough money. I saved up. That was $4,200, and I bought a brand new Volkswagen. And that got like 50 miles to the gallon. Yeah, he taught me how to save money on gas. Mudgett, that was his claim to fame. So I'm in Salem, and I'm getting on the train in the morning. Like I say, the train to the freight train to go to 5:30. You dress kind of like in the dirtiest clothes to get to Boston, which was it was good to get to North Station. And then all of a sudden they put on cars that had seats. They were sitting down, and one day there was this guy talking, very loud, older guy. He looked like Elmer Fudd, and he absolutely had me in stitches. And I was like, Elmer Fudd. He'd take the conductor's hat, put it on, joke. And I was with another person I knew, and he says, that's Smitty, he's a character. I said, oh, I think I've seen him in AA. And he says, oh yeah, he lives over in the Y in Beverly. And then at the time, my sponsor, Kathy, was dating, and she says, oh, I'm dating this guy called Smitty. And I said, it's funny, there's a guy on the train. I said, he looks like Elmer Fudd. I said, but well, he's much older than her. He was like, I'll say 60-something, you know, and here I am, 20-something. And Kathy says, I think that's him. I said, you're kidding. I said, he's older than you, about 20 years older. She goes, yeah. So anyways, so we're on the train, and a few months go by, and so I've met this Smitty. So we really became friends. He was he was just so funny. So what he was working some job in Boston, but he had gotten fired. He'd worked for the railroad many years, and he got fired for drunk. But now he's sober, living in the Y. He's dating Kathy, and they were doing well. And so he got to know me, and he just got a kick out of me. And he says, "You're a feisty thing." And I says, "Oh, my father used to work for the railroad." And I kind of told him. And he's looking one day, and he says to me, "Your father," he says, he goes, "you remind me of a little girl," he said, "that came," because my brother, Smith, it was Atherton Smith. He had a brother, now they're from Ipswich. They're like the world's famous, like, boat builders of Ipswich. They build these boats, his brothers. They're real like Nova Scotians who came down like 100 years ago, he said. But his brother made these famous boats and blah, blah, blah. So Atherton would say, Smitty would say to me, I remember a girl, he says, it's funny, he says, was sitting right there, he says to me, he goes, redhead like yourself, he says, feisty thing, he says, and he goes, her father came down, he goes, this guy called Ed, into Ipswich to buy a boat down, we're in the, down at the pier, and he says, but he goes, she was hanging onto her father's leg, wouldn't let go, he says, and my brother said something like, we'll get her away from you. And my father was like, no, why? And he goes, I laughed. And I says, was that guy Ed Mackesey? And he looked me right in the eye. He says, oh my God, you're her. I said, I was that little girl. He remembers my father going there to buy a rowboat. And my father bought a rowboat from Smitty's brother for Eddie. That was his first rowboat he bought. It was like, and so Smitty and I were like glue. And I remember going home. He says, your father, and he knew everything about Ed. He says, because they both worked for the Railroad Express. This is before he got fired. He says, your father would work all by himself. He would carry steamer trunks on his back, never ask for help. He says he knew how to work rope. He could tie it and swing. I said, oh yeah, he talked to no one. He goes, he never talked to anyone. So Smitty and I, so I went home and I called my father. I said, I met a guy, blah, blah, Smitty on the train today. And he says, oh my God, he says, he was the funniest guy. I said, he looks like Elmer Fudd. And he just acted like, I thought I saw a putty cap. So on that train ride, I became really good friends. And Kathy and Smitty got married. And I gave the wedding over in the Salem Willows. And I was so excited, I said to my father, would you come to my house? He'd been there before. This is before he moved in. I said, would you please come to the wedding, and he goes, oh yeah, I'll come. And I said to my mother, please don't drink, please let Dad come. And the night of the wedding, the afternoon, it was a Saturday afternoon, it was going to be at 4, I called noontime to my mother, and my father called saying I can't make it. My mother got drunk, like she always did, ruined it. My father, I said, just come over to Salem, because they lived in Revere. I said, you can make it, and he wouldn't leave her, and I was so upset, and even Smitty was. So, but it's funny how you meet people, we're just sitting there talking, and people of a lifetime. And I was friends with Smitty till he died. Really, really, really good guy, funny. And he ended up at the end. He got a van, and he was moving freight. He could be like delivery, like he was like air freight, but in a van, and he was so excited. He'd go to Mass General, and he'd call me. He says, I'm going to Mass General to a research group. And I say to him, oh, Dr. Donahue, I know who she is. I said, let me tell you all these things about her. He'd go up, and these doctors were so anal, but I said, he could get anyone's attention. He was like having Don Rickles on. It was like anyone, like Don Rickles could get your attention. And he goes, see, Dr. Donahue, she was a mean, pediatric surgeon. I mean, she just was so anal. And he says, I went up there that day. He goes, I said all this stuff to her, like you said. He goes, I had her laughing so hard. I says, oh, Smitty. I said, I'm so glad. I said, because she just tortures everybody. So the next time I saw her in the OR, I said, did you meet Mr. Smith? Oh, my God, she had so much praise for him. I said, so sometimes these people do have a heart, but it takes, Smitty was, that was a good thing driving in. Like, little world, and my father really, they finally met each other once. I picked my father up and took him over the house, and it was just nice for them to reminisce. But that was it. My mother would never, make things happen. She was too sick, she couldn't help it. And my father would never leave her, so. Yeah, that was another good Pacific story.
I said site specific.
Say again?
I said site specific.
So give me an example.
So like a specific location in Salem.
Down by, it used to be a Salem Theater, right on Essex Street. Right across the street was I think it was called also Brownies. It was like a donut shop, a pastry shop, and it was the best place to go for coffee. You could go in there in the morning, and your coffee was 20 cents. And they'd be
Where in Essex?
on Essex Street in Salem,
Where?
right across the street from the Salem Theater, which is now a consignment store. It's not near the Y, right next door to the YMCA.
Yeah.
And it was just a little store, and you went in and you got donuts and coffee, and they sold, like brownies and ice cream. But you go in there every morning, there'd be like 20, 30, all the men in AA, all the older men, like they were all like in the 60s, 70s. Everyone would meet in there, and you'd just have like a good time. You'd go in, and it was just a fun place to be. And I could bring the dog. The dog went everywhere. I mean, everyone, or sometimes they didn't. I'd have to tie her up outside, and somebody would go in and bring her in. That always, it was very welcoming. So eating downtown Salem, it was nice. I'm trying to think what else was, I did like walking in the Commons. That was a nice place to be. It was kind of crazy hippie, it was during the bicentennial. Like, it's funny watching the stuff last night with Dylan, the bicentennial. I was in Salem, and that was a good summer. Oh yeah, the summer of '76 was all the tall ships came to Salem. They were in Boston, and they came to Salem too. They were it was really quite the to see these big. They had the Polish ship, because of course half of Salem was Polish, so they loved it. You go down the pier there. You could walk down and right down on Canal Street there. I think that's Canal off of Blaney, where the ship is. There was a 3-decker house, and on the first floor, it was Greek, and you could go in there, and that lady made every day spinach pie. It was like you went to a pizza place, but that's all she made, and it was unbelievable. She would give it to a slice. It's like a whole pie, like for $1, and you give your drink for $1. She'd give the pie, and she'd been there like for years. They go like since the '60s, and I got to be there for 2 years, and then everything gets sold. Like I say, condos were coming, so every 3-decker in Salem became a condo. Someone would sign the deed, and like I say, they were gentrifying it then. All the people who lived in these Irish and Polish people, they were just like displaced because the landlords. But yeah, that was a great place on Canal Street. Go in for $1. You could eat a lot of places there for $1. It was nice. Salem had a lot of old. And Peabody, you go over to Peabody. Peabody had hundreds of little coffee shops. Amazing, because of course for every coffee shop there were 5 bar rooms. Peabody was the capital of drinking in the North Shore, I'd say. Salem had an old bookstore. Matter of fact, we bought a lot of books there for you. These 2 brothers up on Essex Street. Remember that bookstore? Yeah, going in there in 1977 buying books. Oh my God, they were the craziest brothers. And I went in there when it first opened. It had very few books, and every month it would just get higher and higher till 30 years later you couldn't even walk in that bookstore. It had so many books, and you'd been in there. And I bought some really great books in there. Stuff that just like stopped you. They would always recommend something. Yeah, it was a great place to hang out in that bookstore. And then right by the old City Hall there was an old bookstore. It was called, like people pay hundreds of dollars for old editions. But I remember going in there and getting a book like for $5. It was The Old Post Road, which my mother grew up talking about. That was like old Route 2. It's probably the old turnpike. It's really what the Mass Turnpike. But it was all about why you went on these roads, like from Boston to the Berkshires, and the toll gates. And I remember reading that book. It was really, because I like geography, so I really liked reading that book about the old roads. And you'd get stopped someplace. It was like 1780, and you pay a toll. There'd be someone there trying to collect money from you. And I remember that book was really quite the book. Buying books down there. Yeah, like downtown Salem, the old part was very nice. So my friend Kathy, like I talked about, who we were very close, she was on welfare. She'd had 7 kids, and I think she only had like a couple left. Little Ricky and Teddy. They were like, when I met them, like 6 and 8, and they were like my brothers. They were so damn cute. We just get along so well. But she ended up, was always on welfare, living in places and getting evicted. And when she married Smitty, she worked in an insurance company. They got this place called, I'll say, Brown's Pond in Peabody. It was this old shack, and all those ponds in Peabody had all these summer places, like from the 1930s. And she moved into this shack, and literally it was a shack, but it was long and narrow. And Smitty, who was so clever, he really was, because like I say, they're all boatmen from Ipswich. He could build anything. We went to that shack, and she moved in, and the 3 of us and other people, we just cleaned that place up. Remember, scrubbed it clean. It was just like an old camp, and she lived there. He helped insulate it, kept it warm. She always had a coffee pot on. I got all the coffee for free because I'd take all the coffee bags at Mass General. Every week I'd bring her home like 10 bags, so she just felt like she was so happy. She always had the coffee pot on. You could always have free coffee. So Peabody, we lived at Brown's Pond, and the kids, and little Ricky, and there was Jeannie, the daughter. Jeannie was like 12. Ricky and Teddy, they were like 7, 8, 9. They had a place to stay because they were like hellions. They were throwing rocks where they lived on the main drag one time on Andover Street. The little kids were always getting picked up by the cops for throwing rocks at cars. So Kathy was so happy. She was moving to Peabody, and her kids could play in the woods and throw as many rocks and stuff, and they play in the pond. And that was a good place. I went down there, spent many, many hours hanging out at her house down there, helping her and stuff. And yeah, Peabody was very affordable. Yeah, it's about Peabody. Yeah, that was like, downtown Peabody, there was really not a lot of shops. Not a lot of shopping places. Salem had more. Beverly had the best. Beverly had more funky stuff to go shopping. The last one was Flynn Tannery. Matter of fact, they called Salem Days. It's in August for 3 days. And your cousin, my nephew Paul, his brother Sean, and the sister Mary, I have pictures of them. They're only probably about 8 or 10 years old. I picked them up and brought them to Salem Days. And they got to, there was face painting and witch stuff in the downtown Salem, and they had a ball. I took them over to the Gables. They loved going to the Gables, and they were very academic, so they liked listening to Nathaniel Hawthorne and that stuff, and took them out to the Willows. And then we went back down to Salem to the parade, and we bought tickets. We won. You bought these tickets to buy something, and I remember Paul says, I'll fill these out, Auntie. And he filled my name out for the 3 tickets, and they were in the box. And about an hour later, they were having a drawing, and then Sean says, I want to go down, I want to see if we win, what we win. So we went down. They both won, I think they won a ticket to they got cotton candy for free. So they gave out a lot of prizes. So the 3 of them got cotton candy, which I know my sister, their mother, would never let them have. So they were so thrilled eating the cotton candy. And they were just about to leave, and someone pulled out a number and yells out my name. And I won a free coat at Flynn Tannery. And I said, oh my God. And Paul was so excited. He was just like, oh my God, Auntie, you won. And then the next week, I went down to Flynn Tannery. It was right on Boston Street, which is now, they just built the condos there because of all the, it's probably damaged by all the chemicals in there. But I went to Flynn Tannery, and I could pick out any leather jacket I wanted, and I got a suede jacket for free with the ticket. And that's all I knew about the tanneries, is that they had showed what they made, and someone had made the coats there, whatever. So I got a nice suede jacket, and that was with Paul and Sean and Mary that day, on Old Salem Day, yeah. Yeah, it was Peabody. But like I say, 90% of the time, every day, I was at an AA meeting. That's what it was about, every single day. I worked every day and went to a meeting every day. And that's where I met. I could go on about the people. The people were just what it was all about. That's what made it work. And it was just enough, the geography and the simplicity of Salem was just enough. I did need isolation, then I did enjoy the people, I guess. Oh, they accepted me more, but I did like the North Shore for that. Yeah, that was my life there. It wasn't bad, it was good, really. So it's October of 1979, and I'm living out in the Willows, and Uncle Eddie moves in. Of course, remember, Uncle Eddie's is hardcore, hanging out at Club 24, which is in Malden, and then the Union Hall in Charlestown. Being the truck driver that he is. But I said to him, I go to meetings here. So he moved in. We hadn't really got along that well up to that point, but he was happy he had a place to live because they were all upset because they had to leave. So I said, I go to this place down Salem. I told him, I thought I'll introduce you to some people. So he met Bob Craig one day, and that was it. But we're going to meetings, and he started like hanging out with me, coming to meetings. And one day I'm at a meeting, and this guy comes over to me, and he says to me, Colleen, he goes, I think you're in trouble. I says, what? He says, there's this guy always following you. I think he's going to hurt you. And he says, if you need help, I'll help you. And I think his name was Peter, and Peter Ford. And I said, and everyone's sitting at the meeting going, because everyone was going, who is this guy? Because everywhere I went, and then finally I said, at a meeting, I said, I had to like stand up. I says, he's not. I said, this is my brother Eddie, because he wouldn't talk to nobody. Because if he did, it was like he'd say like fuck you, anybody. So at this meeting, and it happened to be Jimmy Higgins was there, and Bob Craig, and they got a kick out of it, and I thought so. Eddie would go to a meeting, and the first thing he'd do, he's sitting back of me, get a coffee cup, and then he'd with coffee, spill it, put some on the chair so nobody would sit beside him. He never wanted anyone sitting beside him. And I tell you, talk about a love affair. That was Bob Cragen, who Bob, absolutely fell in love with Eddie. He says, he is my type of person. And then before you know it, there was Eddie. He was more popular than me. Everyone wanted to be around Eddie because he would tell you, where to go. He didn't, like I say, have control of the King's English language well, but he could get the point across in AA. And when he came, everyone didn't know who the hell he was, and then 25 years later, when he left, he died. Everyone missed him. Matter of fact, as of last Tuesday, they were still talking about him. I tell you, he's someone who left an impression on a lot of people. But yeah, the first time, people wondered who this guy was that was following me all around. And I said, and everyone couldn't believe it. They thought he was going to hurt me. I said, no, it's my brother. He just had that look on his face. Said he had that, the scowl look, But I said, deep down inside, he had a heart of gold. He just didn't know it.